Hello, Groveland Township. Today I thought I'd take an opportunity because some of you may be newer to the area or just may not have attended meetings and understand a little bit about how the township finances work. I thought it'd be worthwhile to give you kind of a layman's version of how we do the expenditures here at the township. I know there have been statements recently that said we have over $7 million of surplus funding. This is not the case. We do have surplus money, but it's nowhere near $7 million. Let me explain it to you this way. When the dollars for the township's operation are collected, the operating revenues, which come from the millage for both the fire department and the township, they are rendered on your winter tax bill. Those dollars are collected basically between December and usually about February of the following year, and therefore the fiscal year for the township, which starts on April the 1st. What the township has always done is never agreed to release or spend the money we collect for the future year until the year actually starts. So even though you and I pay our taxes in the winter and the township may hold it for a couple of months in the bank, it doesn't get released to the township for expenditures or to the fire department until April 1st, when the township and fire department's fiscal year actually starts. So think of it this way. If you were working and your pay for the year was $1 million and your boss said, it's the 1st of January, here's your $1 million for the year, would you say I have $1 million surplus, or would you say I now have my operating funds for the entire year and I need to divide it over the 365 days? That's basically the way the township does it, only our fiscal year starts on April the 1st. So the money gets held, it gets released to the fire department and the township on April the 1st, and that is the funding we have to spend for the various projects that get done, both at the operation and projects throughout the next fiscal year until March 31st, when it starts all over again. Most of the money in the township is really in several different funds. A good part of it sits in the general fund. Another large part sits in the fire department fund. Then there's a building department fund, which is separate as well. And the other principal one beyond those three is really what we call our infrastructure fund. And I'd like to give you, again, another kind of a layman's analogy to it. Think about a person that is on a sales commission and says, my base pay is 80% of my income, and the other 20% is made by the sales that he or she makes over the time period that they're getting paid. In the township's case, we have, if you will, the base part of the pay comes in the form of renewable income sources, which is basically the millages for both the fire and the township. Those we know we can count on coming in all the time, and they are used for the day-to-day operations. Just like a person in that environment might say, I make my house payment, car payment, utilities out of my guaranteed base pay. That's really what the township does with the millage dollars that come in to run both the fire department and the township budget. Now, in the case of the person with a sales commission, they may take those dollars and set them aside and periodically use them for things like vacation or a boat or remodeling the house and things like that that you or I might do at home. In the case of the township, we take the residual dollars that are left from some non-guaranteed renewable sources, and at the end of the year, when the balance is all done, we take that money and put it in the infrastructure fund. We accumulate those dollars there until there are enough for us to be able to do significant projects in the township. And that's because most things that get done in the township are pretty darned expensive to do. Road work is extremely expensive. Building a fire station is extremely expensive. And if you look back over the years, what's been done with the infrastructure money that's accumulated periodically is major projects. For example, Fire Station 2 did not come out of yours and my fire millage. It came out of the infrastructure fund that we accumulated over some time. The additional storm warning sirens that went up in the township, some of them were acquired with grants. The ones that weren't were paid out of the infrastructure fund that we had accumulated. The road paving projects where we extended the paving on Groveland Road and on Oak Hill Road, which were the two worst maintained piece of gravel roads in the township, both of those projects came out of the infrastructure funding. The approaches from the gravel roads onto the paved roads like Brant Road, Van Road, Perryville Road, Buckle Lake Road, all of those came with funding that we accumulated over time out of the infrastructure fund. This is the basic principle for which we've run the township really for an extended period of time. Even before I was here, when Don Titsworth was here, this building, the township office, was about a $400,000 project. and it was paid for with cash because the township used to put away whatever money it had left over. The difference is that back then, when we were operating, the township's budget, my first one that I looked at, had about $20,000 of surplus at the end of the year. That would be put away until it had enough to pay for the $400,000 on this building. Subsequent to that, when I became supervisor, the board and I quickly realized we weren't going to ever be able to get a road fixed or build a fire station or do anything if we didn't find a way to get some money put away. And we didn't want to raise the taxes. So we used that for the day-to-day operations. So what we did was take a totally underutilized piece of asset that the township owned, which was the old gravel pit at I-75 and Grange Hall Road, and put it out for bid. And we turned something that had generated $0 for the township for the entire time it was there, $0, and turned it into generating some money by renting pieces of it for various applications. But again, the thing you need to remember is most of those applications, the money that comes from them varies widely in many cases from one year to the next and is not guaranteed in perpetuity like a millage would be. I'll give you a perfect example. The Mabus building that we put there last year, which houses the emergency equipment for the state, is on a lease. But because it's through the state of Michigan and the Michigan State Police, they are prohibited from ever signing a lease beyond 1 year, from October to October, which is the state's fiscal year. So that building was built, not by us, but by the co-developer with us, and on our property, and we get a piece of the rent from it for that year that it's under lease. There is no guarantee, although we feel that the building's likely to stay there for a long time and generate the income. There really is no guarantee that that money will be there every year because it's a one-year contract. Therefore, the township is apprehensive to take those dollars and use them for some ongoing fixed expense. Instead, we put them in the infrastructure fund. The same thing applies for the billboard that we lease the space for that's on the township property and the cellular antenna. I'll give you another good example. The cellular antenna actually has multiple carriers on it, but the revenue we get from it in a given year varies. Even though the antenna is under long-term lease, all the subtenants on it that are on those different antennas are not under lease to us, but to the antenna holder, or the primary leaseholder. So, for example, if you've watched the news recently, you've seen that over the last few years, a lot of cellular companies are starting to combine into fewer and fewer companies. When that happens, you have the risk of losing some of the antennas, and we've had that happen on ours. We have a very good, attractive lease on that antenna, but we're not immune from the changes in the industry where some carriers are coming together and they may combine and eliminate some antennas. So the revenue has been affected on that too, and therefore we don't make fixed, ongoing, permanent expenditures on the revenue that we get off of the antenna. Instead, we put the rent in the infrastructure fund. And we've accumulated it that way so that we're now in a position where we have zero debt on anything, everything is funded. When we take on a project, we time it so that we anticipate having the money there and plenty of time to take care of the acquisition. Most of the money that's in the infrastructure fund, and right now it's around $2 to $2.5 million, that money is set aside for road projects and another project I'll tell you about in a minute. But the road projects we have several of them between this year and 2022. This year, as you all know, I'm sure by now, we're doing Trip Road. That's a very expensive project, and we have to pay for part of that. The next 2 years, there's going to be repaving on Grange Hall Road. They're doing McGinnis Road this year, and then in 2022, we have to come up with our match for the federal aid grant that we're going to get to do the first part of Barron Road. You can't come up with those monies in a guaranteed manner in 1 year. Sometimes the cost for those projects for the township could be $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. It's not likely that we would have that in any given year. The infrastructure fund over the years that I've been here has been sometimes $100,000, $120,000 on a low year, and in the really good years when the pit was taking out a lot of material, it was as high as I think $350,000 or so. But it's changed almost every year. And so that's why we never make permanent commitments on it. That money that's in there really provides us two benefits. It allows us to do these major improvements to the township's infrastructure for the benefit of the community, whether it's adding fire department equipment, a building, or paving a road. And it doesn't allow us to have to incur a major permanent expenditure. We wait till we have the money to do it. And we think that's a benefit to the township. Another benefit to the township is there was a case some years ago where a developer came in. Many times mobile home developers will come into a community and say, we want to put a mobile home in X pieces of parcels over there. And it's frequently not where we have it master planned for mobile home use. A typical technique for mobile home developers is to say, if you don't give me the zoning I want, I'll take you to court and bury you in court costs till you say I yield and give in to me. The last one that came into us that tried to do that went to the township records at the state of Michigan and pulled them up because they're public record and said, we looked at your records, folks. This was in a public meeting. You folks have some money. We don't want to get in a legal battle with you. We'd like to know if you'd entertain this project. And we didn't end up doing it. That is the money that helps preserve the values that the township holds dear. If you go back far enough, you'll find out that when we fought Stablex for the landfill on the gravel pit that's at I-75 and Grange Hall, the township really had to spend over $400,000 in 1977 dollars to get that to not be a landfill. The dollar amounts may seem big to you or I as individuals, but in the perspective of what the township has to deal with, the solutions are commonly $200,000 to $700,000 to fix. And that's why we maintain a couple of $1,000,000 in there. The other thing is, one of the things we decided a long time ago is we have no business district. 40% of Groveland Township's property is effectively tax exempt. It's owned by the state of Michigan, Oakland County, or it's the roads. That's why we have such a low, slow growth rate here. We actually have less people in Groveland Township today than we had in the year 2000. Our 2010 census was an 11% drop in population. And for 4 or 5 years, we didn't build a single house. We're now at a rate where we're building houses maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of a third to half what we were before 2008. And so our population's slowly coming back up, but I'll be surprised if it even hits the 2000 number by the 2020 census. I hope it does, but I wouldn't bet on it. Our growth rate in this township is extremely slow. The average growth rate on our state equalized value on our property taxes is really about 2/3 of what it used to be before the 2008 downturn. All of this is why we make sure we take a conservative approach and minimize the need to borrow money in the township. The other reason that we have some there is we have decided a long time ago that the future of this township's financial security long-term is determined by what we end up doing with that 90 acres or so that we have left on Grange Hall and I-75. The material for the mining there is pretty much all done now. We're going to moving into the reclamation stages, and we know with the advent of the ORV park by Mount Holly that that property will be literally the most valuable property in the area and the only place for us to have some sort of commercial money development. One of the things we decided to do some time ago was say, let's set some money aside in case we, the township, decide we need to put some sort of infrastructure, whether it's a community well or a community septic system, to get the kind of property development on there that we want that will match our master plan and yield us the kind of revenue long-term in taxes that we think we need to meet the needs of the township going forward. So it's a deliberate effort on the part of the township to have more cash reserve than we typically would have right now because we're hedging our bets that we may need some for the development of that property. If it turns out we don't need it for that, well, then we'll probably pour it back into either the roads, or the fire department, or the same things we've been doing all along for the last 22 years. We felt it was important for you to understand where the money is and how it's actually set up. There's not $7 million plus a surplus in the township. There's about $2 to $2.5 million. And we did that deliberately for the reasons I've outlined. If you have any questions on this video or any other issues on the township, please feel free to call. We would be happy to explain them to you, and it might give us a reason for doing another video for you. So until the next video, Groveland Township, have a great day, enjoy the summer, and we'll be talking to you in the future. Thank you.